Inside of Russia, more and more of the insiders are confessing defeat. And that's something backed up by what we see on the maps. Take a look at General Leonid Ivashov. He declares that there is a strategic defeat, quote, in every direction. General Ivashov is a retired colonel general, respected by the Soviet and the Russian veterans. He served inside the system. He knows it well, and he also knows its limits. But there's something else. His break with the formal Kremlin talking points, it gives his loyalists permission to speak. And when someone looks at the fires, the outages, the ground that Russia is losing, it looks like the general is correct. But the general is not alone. Look at Igor Strelkov. He's a former FSB agent, and in 2014, he was a warlord in Donetsk. But today, he says compromise is defeat. He predicts ruin for elites trapped by their own propaganda. Nationalists still listen to him, though he is today behind bars. But he's not alone. Look on state television. Look at Mikhail Kordonyok. He's a retired air defense colonel who says that today, things are only going to get worse for Russia. He says the outlook will get worse for Russia, not better. And this is something he said on Rossiya Один, the Kremlin's flagship TV channel. So today, when we're seeing this on Russian national television, that things are getting worse, you could probably bet that, in fact, they are. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kyiv Post and a national security advisor. The situation for Russia is, in fact, getting worse, and we can see that not just in the words, but also what we see. The power failures, the rail that is slowing down, the radars that are going dark. Today, we see that the fuel is tightening, and the repairs are dragging on, and the commanders are out of options. Today, for Russia, across its massive space of 11 time zones, there are problems. In the Far East, we see that they've lost electricity in Sakhalin. In the West, we see that Ukraine is regularly attacking the ports. It is regularly attacking the energy infrastructure, and it's regularly attacking the refineries. And all of this is putting Russia into a situation where it's no longer about taking territory in Ukraine, it's about survival. How does Russia continue to fight a war that clearly it's not winning? Clearly, Ukraine has taken the war to Russia. So help me get the truth to more people, that in fact it is Russia that is fighting and losing a war, and not Ukraine. Despite what the press says, the press always tries to make it look like Russia is a powerful country, a country that almost certainly would win. Nothing could be further from the truth. All of the data suggests that Russia is losing. And that is precisely why today we must stand behind Ukraine. We must be united to support Ukraine in its fight for freedom and its fight to break the Putin regime. All I ask you to do is this. Please help us reach 250,000 subscribers by subscribing to this channel. Confirm that you are still subscribed, and like this video, share it with others, and leave your comments below. And if you'd like, consider becoming a channel member today. So let's look at these attacks that Ukraine's been carrying out and how they're changing this war. Look at the attacks that we've just seen at the high voltage sites across Russia. The one in Forlovskaya, that was a 500 kilowatt line that was hit. Look at the one in Volgograd. Look at the attacks that they've carried out in Riskalka. All these attacks, one after another, including the ones in Kursk, are now causing many Russian homes to go without electricity. But there's something else to this. Why is Ukraine attacking them? Well, because when the energy goes out, it means the military trains, the fuel pumps, the warehouse lights, they all stop working. And today, that is what the objective. Ukraine's objective today is to make it impossible for Russia to wage war, to make it impossible for Russia to continue waging this war of aggression against Ukraine by taking away the capacity of Russia to wage war. However, in Russia, it's not simply Ukraine's attacks. It's probably very predictable that Ukraine would carry out attacks on Russia. That's what happens during wars. But probably what most people did not see coming was the fact that there is a local resistance rising within Russia. Today, we see that this resistance, called ATESH, is striking the regime's communications backbone. In fact, it attacked a mobile R-417, a baguette relay truck in Rostov. Now, what's interesting is that they struck it at the airfield there. This relay truck was important. It links radios across long distances and also blocks signals. In the case of Bryansk, we saw ATESH disable a transformer there. It was able to take the regional FSB office offline. Today, we see that ATESH, a group of Russians that's very loosely organized, is attacking structures across Russia. Day after day, there's more news, more videos, more footage that comes out proving how active they are. So not only is Russia facing a war that's losing in Ukraine, it's now facing a population rising against it inside of Russia. But today this shows how very weak and debilitated the command structure is in Russia. How can they get over this? How can they make sure to defend their own territory? Look at the case of Crimea. Ukraine hit the core of the S-400 shield there. Now, what's so important about this shield is this was the premier air defense for Russia. But now Ukraine destroyed that. Ukraine was also able to destroy another radar that was also located there. These attacks, one after another, going after the radars in Crimea, not only put Russia in the dark, but it'll make the next successive attacks on Crimea more successful. In fact, Russia is so certain that there will be more attacks that last night, again, they paused all traffic on the Kerch bridge. But more than that, they turned off the internet to the region. They were worried that there was going to be more incoming attacks by Ukraine. But Ukraine has been picking up the attacks. That is factually true. We saw the attacks just yesterday at Port Kavkaz. We saw the attacks in Tuapse. These attacks are making it harder for Russia to transport oil. Oil is the lifeblood for the Russian regime. Without that, they don't have money. Without money, they can't fight a war. So Ukraine is going after one after another, going after the ports, going after Crimea, going after things that are necessary for Russia to keep fighting. But there's something else happening, and this is also very important. We see that the Russian generals, the Russian officers, are increasingly concerned. Today we see that they are not sure how this war is going to work out. Look at the case of Major General Ivan Popov. He says that today there's a severe shortage of artillery. There's a severe shortage of soldiers. And the soldiers that they have are exhausted. They cannot keep fighting. Keep in mind, this is a Russian general currently in the war declaring this. That's very important. Once again, this is not something that's coming out from the Ukrainian side. This is not propaganda. This is the Russian side talking about how the war is currently going. Today, there's something else going on, though, that's degrading the Russian military. And those are the purges. The purges that are ongoing and just seem never to stop are something that are directly hurting Russia's ability to wage war. Every time that a Russian general is purged, every time one is arrested, you can be sure that that creates a chilling effect for the Russian military. Nobody wants to sign orders. Nobody wants to be responsible for what goes wrong because nobody wants to take the blame. Should, in fact, there be an investigation by the FSB. Today, there are more and more investigations. More and more generals are going to jail. And this is while the FSB itself is engaged in a civil war, something that we'll get to in the next couple of days. Because the fighting within the Russian security structure, it's truly getting out of control. It's amazing to watch. It's something that has never happened, as far as I know, in Russian history. There's never been a fight like what we are seeing now with the Russian Siloviki. And while things are going worse for Russia in the rear, look what we see going on the ground near Kupiansk. There, we see that the Ukrainian units are pushing into a Russian lodgment northwest of the city. What's important to know about this is that the Russian troops in the northern urban blocks are, at this point, truly surrounded. Now, surrounding fire forces improvised retreats under pressure, and that's why they're going so badly. It appears that Ukraine laid a trap for the Russians. It's allowing them to come into Kursk. But once they get into Pokrovsk, hell begins. And so today for the Russian troops, there's no victory in Pokrovsk. There's a situation that is growing incredibly out of control. Look at the numbers that we see in Dobropilya. That is another major stress point for the Kremlin regime. The assaults there, we've seen that Ukraine is successful in liberating territory. That is something that the Russians had definitely not expected. The fact that in the Pokrovsk axis, things are not going well. But ask yourself this, why do we give so much attention to Pokrovsk? Time and again I've said that there's a reason that the Kremlin talks so much about it. That's because they have nothing else to show. Imagine being more than 3.5 years into a 3-day special military operation, and your greatest success is not taking Kiev, but hoping that you're soon to take Pokrovsk. Who knew that Pokrovsk existed before this war? It was not a well-known city. So why is it such a big deal now? Because the Kremlin would like you to believe it is. The Kremlin would like you to believe that now the tide has turned. But nothing could be further from the truth. So despite what Russia says, the tide has not turned their direction. Things for Russia are not getting better. We saw the recent attacks by Ukraine outside of Moscow, attacking the ring that delivers the oil there. Now, what's important about this is what also provides what is necessary for jet fuel. Without jet fuel, how do you run a country? How do you run a military? How do you run Moscow? Moscow without jet fuel? Yes, it's becoming realistic. About a quarter of Russia's capacity to ship jet fuel was destroyed. One attack after another. When you look at this, how can you come to the conclusion that things are going Moscow's way? Quite the opposite. They are not. But within Russia, there's something else. There's something else that is causing disquiet, causing concern, causing alarm. And that's what we see right now occurring, though, with the common people. Increasingly in Russia, there is more and more people saying that they're not happy. Now, in a dictatorship like Putin's, that is actually an outlier. That is actually something to watch. Because in normal countries, there are protests. There are people that complain about their governments. There are people who claim that their president is a dictator. But in the case of Russia, you cannot do that. But in Russia, people are doing that. So what's going on? What does this all mean? Well, we can assume that when we see more of these statements like Ivashov, who's there telling the veterans that things are going badly, the fact that Russia is not winning, that's something that resonates with a large part of the population. When someone like Strelkov speaks out, the nationalists across Russia, his audience, understand him. They listen to him. And today they know he's in prison for challenging the Putin regime. Look at what we see with the colonel, Kordenyok. His statements on Russian national television, it's telling the population the truth of what's really happening. So why are so many people all at one time now speaking the truth? Why are they really talking about what's happening in Russia and no longer lying about it? The answer is simple. Because they are all seeing what's happening. They're seeing that Russia is not winning. So when you look at this war, and you look at Pokrovsk as an example, look at Dobropilya as an example, what do you see? Is this a 3-day special military operation by the world's second largest military? Or is this a total disaster for Russia? The fact is that today the Putin regime has put itself into a terrible situation, a situation that very well could cause its downfall. And that's why within Russia, it's not about Pokrovsk. It's not about Dobropilya. It's ultimately about the regime. Because today, Ukraine's objective is no longer about fighting for a piece of territory. It's about preventing Russia from waging war. And today, the Putin regime is a target to be demilitarized. What Ukraine is doing could very well cause the fall of Putin. So keep your eyes on the situation. Things are getting very tense in Russia. And the best part? They're about to get even worse. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, consider becoming a channel member, and leave your comments below. And please do see the first comment, which I've pinned, on how you too can donate for Ukrainian soldiers to get life-saving drones. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.